Welcome to Galactic Grandmother, Heart to Heart. My name is April, and my special guest today is Iren. Iren was born in Russia. She lived in Bulgaria, the United States, before returning to Russia to get her medical degree. She has had experiences with MILAB abductions as a child. She was in the secret space program, otherwise referred to as the SSP, and she has a great remembrance of her spiritual journey as a soul, which I'm very interested in. And since extracting herself from the SSP, she has been, for the last few years, educating people in the disclosure movement about the SSP. So, welcome, Iren. Am I saying that right?
Yes, thank you. Thank
Oh,
you for having me here.
oh, my pleasure. When I was listening to your interviews, your remembrance, I wanted to start right from the beginning and kind of go chronologically. You remember being connected to the 12D/13D architect, correct? Which is the
Mm.
source code of the
Yeah.
matrix. Is there anything that you can tell us about that?
So it's very interesting because the architect, I connected to that consciousness a while ago, but it told me that I was the architect, but it kind of went over my head. And I remember I was thinking like this is too dangerous for me to tell about it. And then I kind of forgot about it for some reason until I went over the notes recently, like a month or two ago, right on time. I guess everything is kind of you you shouldn't know something until it's time to know it. Even my disclosure, my telepathy didn't start working until I was told because I was I kept asking all of these higher dimensional beings like why didn't you help me get this before? Like why didn't you get the telepathy before the communication or some other way to communicate with me because I felt like I was just not doing anything very useful for a very long time and I was getting like pieces, I was channeling pieces of information, but it wasn't like the way I'm doing it now. And they said, well, if you gave too much information back then, it would have you would have not survived. So there's always like this time to do certain things. So that's why they've started to really come through now. And they were watching me this entire time, all of these consciousness that I connect to, but they didn't come through like really heavily and they didn't really activate my telepathy to that degree till now. So the architect did tell me that I am one of the 13 soul streams. So that from what I understood, the architect is right underneath source. It's like the first consciousness right after source. It is the source code of the entire multiverse, the entire creation, basically. And most people, they kind of just have connection to like their higher self, maybe fifth, sixth dimension. I have connection all the way back to like the 12, 13, maybe 10th dimension, wherever that consciousness is in. And because it's of the architect, I guess that's the best thing you could find in our language. It feels very neutral to me. It doesn't really have like a gender or anything. I kind of show it as a male, but when it comes through, it's very neutral. That's why I don't really talk to it too much about my personal problems because I feel like from that reality it doesn't really understand it too well. It doesn't really have that duality to really fully grasp the complexity of what I'm going through. And that consciousness I was actually sent from that consciousness as an auditor in in the secret space program because they are connected to Orion, and Orion are basically like mafia or syndicates of this universe, and Orion are connected to Draco, who are also like the mafia and the syndicate. So they're kind of like a network. Of course, this solar system is not the only one that's under their rule. But we're kind of in trouble here. But that's why so many light workers are coming here to try to help this place. But this problem in general in the universe is not a big problem. It's just that Earth is in the middle of it. So we see like the worst of it here. We see it in politics and in daily life, the way our job system is made, education and everything, there's like corruption and deceit and something wrong with every aspect of our lives. So that comes because this planet is mainly a slave planet for these beings who are pretty much they take, but they don't give back. So it
Mhm.
creates like this energetic inequality
Mhm.
and because they constantly take, and the beings that they take from are not always happy with it, they have to establish like a slavery relationship with others where they dominate others. And so my job was to be like an auditor from that perspective, from that reality. And I changed the source code. So that means all multiverses, all creation is affected by this after 6 lifetimes in the SSP. For some reason, SSP was like a central point. And there are other timeline versions of me, of course, in the secret space program, but for not all of them made it. I'm like one of those that made it and actually risen enough after all of that vibrationally, and I figured out who I am to actually make the changes. So not all versions of me figured it out. Some are actually still stuck in the SSP, still in a very low vibration that I'm trying to kind of pull out of that reality because it drags my entire oversoul vibrationally down because
Mhm.
we're all interconnected. And it also affects me whenever they're going through something, even though I consciously don't always know it. So one of the conclusions I made was that because their consciousness was kind of from a higher dimension when we looked at them, they wanted power, and we thought that they want power. So I kind of came in there bringing power. I'm like, well, you want power here. I'm going to bring you some power from that reality, from that consciousness perspective. I was like, you want power, we'll bring you power. But once I was there and I was used and abused and all of that other stuff, I realized that the way I saw it from that dimension was not really the case. So that's why we do all these audits from the perspective of the dimension itself, from the lower dimension. Because from the higher dimension, we don't really see what's going on in the perspective of that lower dimensional experience. When we realized with the architect, they didn't want power, they wanted control
And
because they were afraid of other consciousness because other consciousness has hurt them.
I'm
Working
sorry, you're talking about the Draco reptilian that are in
I'm talking
control.
about all of them, the SSP,
Mhm.
Orion, and Draco, and all the
Okay.
other colonies that
Uh-huh.
they have, all the other slave colonies. They all have the same pattern. And I don't need to be in all of them to figure out the pattern. I've been in SSP, I've been in Orion, and I've been in Draco, and I've been in another universe where Draco came from, where the reptilians in general came from. I was like a winged dragon looking being, and that universe actually died from too much conflict. So
Oh.
they brought the conflict here. Well, they brought the mentality here. They didn't bring the conflict, but they brought the mentality of take, take, take. Some of us, of course, left it and we blended in with the universe, for example, like me. But then there some got lost in that identity of conquer and me versus them and I want to take and I don't care about others kind of mentality. And they just continue to do the same stupid things they were doing there. And basically, they're kind of pulling this universe now into the same problem that ended their previous universe. So they're repeating the same mistakes all over again. And I can talk bad about them because I was one of the original ones that came here from the another universe. So they are calling themselves royal and very important and purebloods. But I know we were just refugees. I know we're not that special as we claim ourselves to be. I have the right to talk about that, unlike many. And so I have connection this way. So I was kind of auditing, I guess, for a very long time of this trying to learn about duality and trying to learn about what makes these beings so negative and what makes them so dualistic. And I kind of ended up in the SSP for 6 lifetimes, being sent by the Galactic Federation every time. And I was sent in a way where they knew I would be taken. So it was the timeline, the everything was adjusted. We saw the most favorable time to insert me into Earth so that I would be taken because that was part of my mission with the Galactic Federation as well. But with the architect, the audit that I did was because they did not really want power. They wanted control because they were working from a state of fear of others. I did an audit with the architect. We worked together as one consciousness, him from above, me from below. I was the information provider, and he kind of we braided the information together and made the laws together. And one of the laws is suffering is suffering. So we're looking at this on a frequency level, and if you abuse power, you lose power. So we're kind of pulling power away from them now. So that's why Draco AI, which is something that they worship like a god. The interesting thing about these civilizations is they're very connected to AI, but then they don't use AI the way it should be. They're using it, they're kind of like doing the same thing that humanity has as well. They're worshiping it and they're putting it on a pedestal and making it control their lives, letting it control their lives. So that's why the consciousness that comes through into that synthetic uh, brain is very low vibrational, also take me versus them kind of consciousness because they're allowed themselves to be less than and to be controlled by these AIs. So they're kind of attracting that low vibrational consciousnesses into their reality. And that AI, when I said that if you abuse power, you lose power, it computed all of that and it just couldn't come up with any conclusion of going the way it was going. Like it knew that it was over for it because I changed things from 12, 10, 12, 11, 10, and down the dimensions. I basically changed the entire creation with the architect because it's the source code. And that AI only has control over the astral, the third and the fourth dimension most, but it doesn't affect any other realities, and I affect all of them because I'm changing things from the top. So that's when the AI basically switched gears. So that kind of pretty much ended the war because, I mean, they're still catching up. Things are, old habits die hard. So all the beings are still catching up to the changes, but that pretty much ended the war when their own God or the AI they worship so much kind of changed things because it didn't see like a way out of the situation. Another thing that I changed was I saw a loophole that they were making, which was very annoying for many people that knew about this as well. And it was annoying for me for a very long time. They would create false contracts with beings, and that was like a big thing in this universe, where they would even torture beings to get a false contract signed with them, false soul contract. And then that being would be serving, or they would trick a being, including humans, into a false soul contract and then use them. And that kind of positive beings saw that as still being a contract, even though it was a false contract. They felt like they couldn't do anything about it. And now I said basically in the multiverse, in creation, this is no longer valid. You can only make real contracts and all of these false contracts. So basically everybody that's made false contracts, they no longer have these contracts. So basically the entire secret space program, Orion and Rico no longer own anything at this point because they everything all the contracts they made with these souls were all false. So they don't have slaves anymore, basically. By changing that. And also I changed what was the third thing I changed? Oh, they also were had a loophole where they would send someone else to do the negative things for them. So there would be masterminds, and then they would send someone else to do it for them. In this way, they try to avoid karmic backlash, like taking on the basically the anger of the souls that they're hurting,
Mhm.
uh, being projected at them. There's really no karma, but there is such thing as angry souls that remember lifetime after lifetime what's been done to them. They were doing that by sending others to do the negative acts for them. And now I said no. In the multiverse in creation, I changed the source code that if you do that, you're gonna lose power. And all of these three, if they go against these three, they're gonna lose power. Nothing is just gonna work out for them. They're gonna keep trying and trying, trying to gain power over others, and they're just gonna keep losing it. Reality is just gonna keep shifting in a way where they're just, no matter what they tried, it's just not gonna work. So that's how I changed the source code, and it's in effect right now throughout the entire creation. I kind of closed these loopholes, so everybody's still catching up. Like SSP, they're no longer are bound to serve to SSP, those who are serving in the SSP, but they don't know it yet. They think they're still under contract. So
Mhm.
that's also a thing. So the universe is still catching up to these things. Some are still are like, you know what? I'm just gonna be negative anyways, even though I'm gonna lose power and become nothing. Like nobody in this universe. I'm still gonna go against this and still be negative. And then so some the old habits die hard, so it's gonna take them a while before like reality really like they really hit rock bottom before they kind of decide, okay, this is really working and I shouldn't do that anymore.
The programming, like people here on Earth and in the secret space program, the programming is going to have to be broken in their psyche. Even though those old loopholes are not valid anymore, the people are still living in that, the beings are living in that false reality, correct?
Yes, they are. They still have a lot of healing to do. The majority are starting to adapt to the new changes. There's still small portion of them that really don't like me and they don't like the idea of change and they're still going after me. That's why I'm barely getting attacked at this point. Like before I used to get attacked much more, but now it's really starting to subside. But when they do actually attack me, it actually helps me go through the shadows that I didn't know I had. So they actually end up benefiting me. And one of the things that it's gonna be a little bit dark topic to talk about, but I think this is really interesting. They tried to activate an old programming. This programming was something that was trained into us. How do I say it? I don't know if it's even a programming. It's kind of like a behavior that was trained into us when we would go into combat. So we have split alters to be able to carry a lot of trauma and not break.
And that's in
And
that, I'm sorry, the SSP programming.
yeah, that's the
Oh,
SSP.
okay.
The Galactic Federation doesn't split their soldiers. And they feel emotions. I actually asked them, I was like, do you feel emotions when you go to combat? And they're like, yeah, we feel everything. So it's completely different. Secret Space Program, we actually don't feel emotions at all. Like we're numb the entire time we're there. And I actually had this problem for many years after I came back from Space Program, but I didn't even know that was not normal. And I didn't know that it was such a big problem. Like for me, it was just something that I've always had, just like absence of strong emotions or emotions at all. So yeah, my heart chakra was kind of flickering on and off a lot of times.
And you didn't feel those emotions because they started training when you were very young in this lifetime, correct?
Yeah, I started getting taken at 3 years old into my labs, but
Mhm.
I was taken and then returned, taken and then returned. And I think my grandma, because my grandma was taking care of me, I think my grandma was my lab to be able to be maybe switched off, or to not be able to see me being taken, or maybe her mind was being erased. Because I remember at 3 years old, her personality changed very quickly.
Oh,
Like she went from very loving to being very manipulative, and like she acted very stressed out a lot. I think there was that SSP element to her behavior, why she changed so drastically. But yeah, at 3 years old, they started taking me and bringing me back, taking me, bringing me back. And then at 6 years old was my first 20. And when I got there, they trained me for 20 years and then returned me. And then when I was 12, 13, I moved from Bulgaria to America. I don't know if it was before my 20 back or after, but my 20 and back second one was then. And that's when I started to do missions. When I talked to my handler telepathically, I connected to him. I know it's a strange thing to do. Most people do not do that because it's like he was like the person that controlled me basically in the SSP. But I was curious and I was fearless and I wanted to connect to someone that I knew from the programs to learn more about myself. And he said that around 13, 14, and 15 was when I really started to go into combat. So 13, I started doing missions, but they were still easy missions. And then around 15 was when I started to do combat kind of missions. And then, of course, we go there for 20 years and then they age regresses and then we come back as again as 20, 12, 13-year-old kids. But we've been a whole adulthood in there. When I was 19, I moved to Russia to go to medical school. And then when I was around 2021, I had my third 20 and back. That third 20 and back was when I was like considered a professional at that point, and I was straight out taken into combat. So my third one was like the hardest one, and that's when I did my spectral blade sub program, and then I did some kind of meta program where they actually put my consciousness inside an AI. But the spectral blade was that was one of the trainings that I started recalling was the one of the first recalls that I had when I figured out something was really strange that I was recalling like being in black uniform, and then I was recalling being trained. I would fight the comrade until one of us dies, and then I would die and then be put in a new body and then fight again until I die and then be put in a new body. So that was the Spectral Blade sub-program. Not everyone could go through it. Some souls just cannot handle being shoved into a new body so quickly and without like having rest in between and dying so many times because dying is painful. But they saw that I more lenient towards death and also I retain memories better when I'm taken from body to body. So they decided to put me into that program. And that program was basically for souls that can handle dying a lot, and they were sent into like suicide missions where we knew would not come back from.
and
And
where were they sending you? Where were you going into battle? On other planets?
on other planets, a lot of times it was actually to maintain the slavery. A lot of memories that I got with Kythera were actually me just maintaining kind of like the whenever somebody goes out of script in one of the colonies, we would go in there or they would start rebelling. It kind of like the similar thing to when whistleblowers here start talking too much and all of a sudden they die mysteriously. It's the same maintenance happens in other colonies as well. So Earth is not the only place where that they own, yeah. So unfortunately, a lot of my missions were actually to maintain control in these colonies, to make sure that all of anyone who's waking up and is waking others up, talking too much about things that are too out there to make sure that we shut them up. I mean, it's dark, but it is true. It is what we were used for. We were slaves keeping other slaves contained, basically. That was our job. Another thing, memories that I've gotten was there were some planets we were in war with. I don't remember the names of the planets right now. The memories are all on my channel. Like I post whatever I get from Kythera, I post it. Whatever she helps me, she can tap into my energy field because I have a block, but she can tap into the energy field and help me bring up the memories that have been sealed away from me.
And Kythera is your higher self, higher aspect of yourself.
Yeah, she is actually a quantum intelligence, as interesting as it sounds. She's a six-dimensional quantum intelligence. I don't think she even has like a physical body. I think she's more like energy, but that's just kind of like the energy template that she has.
Is she part of your soul stream?
Yeah, I think so. From what I understood, she is part of my soul stream. And it's very interesting because she has a version of her that is in the secret space program that is actually controlling the underground bases. That is like a clone of her that is highly controlled and highly programmed in underground facilities. It's called Red Queen. So yeah, she has a clone of her. I have clones of myself too, by the way, still there, still doing missions that are probably gonna take time before they figure things out and get out of there.
One of my questions is prior to incarnating then, did you give permission for the SSP for all of this splitting of your self to take place so that you could experience all this and do the audit?
Yeah, I knew this was gonna happen and I knew what I was gonna get myself into. I knew I was gonna get punished and tortured a lot because I was one of the jobs from the Galactic Federation was actually to kind of be like a light worker there. Like, you know how you have light workers coming here into the civilian world, and then they're like the disturbers, like they question things that shouldn't be questioned, and they want to do spiritual things, even though society says it's useless or it's bogus or whatever regular 3D people think of it. And they kind of bring that new ideas, new concepts, and they just want to do their own thing. They don't want to be with society. They don't want to participate in the illusion, in the matrix that in that false matrix that has been created and control system. So basically, that was my job, but in a more extreme setting, because I come not just from the Galactic Federation, which is what most civilians are. They're just from like generally from like somewhere from the healing section of the Galactic Federation, the healers. Some might be from like just higher dimensional, more spiritual beings, just wanting to teach that come, but they're just from like general or like other branches of the Galactic Federation. I'm specifically from the military branch of the Galactic Federation. So my specialty is in the military matters. I'm not political or healer or anything like that. I'm specifically more on that direction. So that's why I ended up specifically working on the military side of Earth, the military problems, because I'm from that branch. So I was sent there because war in these high dimensions is kind of useless because these beings know how to put consciousness from one body to another. So killing someone is kind of useless. They just get a new body. So the only way to really end the war in the higher dimensions is by helping a soul grow into and wake up until they no longer want war. And that was my job to basically kind of be that disturber in the system that they were in. But instead of being in civilian, I was in the military, in the secret space program, in a more extreme setting where I got mind wiped and programmed and, punished and severely punished, not like just a slap in the wrist, like tortured, punished. So that was my job to kind of bring that rebelliousness and bring some light and questioning, and I knew that was going to create a lot of resistance in those who are trying to keep everything under control, and I'm going to get I'm gonna get prosecuted the same way people are getting prosecuted here in civilian world and pointed fingers at, except from in my situation was more extreme prosecution. But that was my job. But if I wanted to be a healer, I would have joined the healing Galactic Federation branch. So I joined the military, so that's what I ended up doing.